Um, Good evening, everyone. My name's Nikki. I'm the coordinator for the community growing project at Barnes Common. Thank you, everyone who's joining us this evening. It's the final talk in our summer series of talks. It's no longer feeling very summery outside, but I think this one is quite a nice introduction to autumn.
Yeah.
So we've got Adi here this evening, who's the founder of Adi's Urban Mushrooms, and he's going to talk to us about the wonderful world of fungi. He's got a great deal of experience and passion in this field. Um, just a few little housekeeping bits. If you could keep yourselves on mute just to avoid any background noise. And there will be an opportunity to ask questions during the talk, either by using the raise hand function or popping them in the chat. And we are recording the talk so that we can put it up on our website later. So if you don't want to appear on the recording, if you just turn your camera off. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Adi now to make a start.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. And thanks very much for having me and inviting me to do this talk. So my name is Adi. I've been a forager for 45 years. I started as a teenager and have been foraging mushrooms all that time, not always at the same intensity, but now, thanks to the summer having ended and the rains being here and the temperatures dropping a little bit, the mushroom foraging season is in full swing. And so at the moment, I spend all my weekends in the forest and I'm doing guided foraging walks. And in about 3 years ago, I founded a company called Urban Mushrooms London, and trading as Adi's Urban Mushrooms. I grow mushrooms and sell them at farmers market half the year, and then I do lots of foraging, no growing workshops in mainly with community gardens, and do these foraging walks in the autumn foraging season. So I wonder whether you'd be happy to turn on your cameras and do a quick introduction of yourself. And I'm really curious to hear what is your interest or your experience with mushrooms. Gia, you turn on your camera. Would you like to start?
I have very, very limited experience of a knowledge of fungi. Um, I went on a fungi walk organized by this organization a couple of years ago, I think it was,
Yeah.
around Barnes Common. I was amazed at the variety and where they grow. And then actually just this weekend, I went for a walk near Richmond Park and
Yeah.
found lots of different fungi in a kind of wooded area, which had been eaten by, I don't know, squirrels maybe, or other.
Little slugs. Yeah.
So they're providing nourishment, but I wouldn't be confident enough to forage. I'd love to, but
Thank you. Okay. Who else would like to introduce themselves?
I'll go because I'm sort of partway eating through my dinner, so whilst I'm listening, so I'll quickly introduce myself and then continue with my dinner whilst listening. Hope you're not offended by that. Thanks so much for arranging the talk. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Claire. I've had various involvements with Barnes Common organization and specifically through the Growing Project. So I'm very interested in the edible side of mushrooms, but also just, fascinated by the nature and the systems, of mushrooms, how the mycelia work. I'm interested in the sort of relationalities that they facilitate between plants and for animals and all the things that we don't know. We live outside of London now, in East Sussex, and we recently had a wonderful bloom of enormous parasols And it was the first mushroom that I felt really confident that I could just pick it and eat it. And it was nice. Yeah.
They're a fantastic, delicious mushroom. Amazing. Does anyone? So I've seen Elena has commented. Thanks very much about your camera not working and introducing yourself, and having been put off from wild mushrooms because they were really maggoty or wormy. Yes, I completely understand. Um, when you go foraging for food in the wild, you share your food always with other animals. And slugs are one thing. So this Sunday I picked a porcino, which is basically the whole mushroom was eaten, and there was just the base that was left. But because I know the site very well and the mushrooms very well, I took it because the base was really nice as well. Does anyone else want to introduce themselves? Okay. Oh, Julie, yeah. You need to unmute yourself.
Hello, I'm Julie. I live in the north of Scotland on the Murray coast.
Oh.
So quite different from where you are. My main interest in mushrooms, to be honest, is as an illustrator. I'm studying natural history illustration, and yeah, I find their form, the texture, the color really fascinating. So I look at it more from an artistic point of view.
Brilliant, thanks. Yeah, there are lots of artists that joined the South London Mushroom Club that I'm running at the Remakery in Southwest London with very different angles into mushrooms, and I find it absolutely fascinating, different kind of approaches to mushroom that people have. So I suggest I'll start with the talk. I'm going to share my presentation, if I can see that. Okay, so let's just start here. Can you see this okay? Okay, and if you have any questions during the talk, just either raise your hand and then tell us what your question is, or put a question in the chat, and Jackie and Nikki will monitor the chat for us and then ask. So I've told you a little bit about Adi's mushrooms. You can see some impressions here on the left. These are last year's foraging walks that I do actually in West Sussex. East Sussex is equally fantastic for mushroom foraging. And I do, here's a picture on the right, top right of my an impression of a market stall where I go on farmers markets. I'm mainly on Herne Hill Farmers Market. It will start again end of November because, as I said, at the moment I'm just spending time in the forest with people. And I do these growing workshops, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the kind of ways of growing mushrooms in many in community gardens as well. So I think it's really interesting, and I'll start off with this to note that the kind of relationship that we have with fungi and mushrooms is really dependent on our culture. And obviously within cultures, you've got different subcultures or different traditions in families. But what many researchers talk about is that we have got cultures that are mycophilic, and any word that has the term myco in it stands for mushroom or fungi related. And so mycophilic is mushroom loving cultures, and mycophobic, that's cultures that are fearful of mushrooms. And you can see here a map of Europe, for example, on the left there with the red countries, where clearly the Ireland, the UK, most of Germany, the northern part of Germany are so-called mycophobic cultures. But luckily, this is really changing at the moment. I really sense that there's a huge change with that, particularly as well with really interesting films on Netflix. For example, the fantastic Fungi. Yeah, exactly, on Netflix, or we've just had a series on the BBC Earth where Chris Packham talked about fungi as well at great length, and that's great to see. I mean, it's a really neglected area of knowledge, and I have to say I'm not a mycologist, so my background is in social work, and I've been a social worker all my life. But I've had this passion for mushroom foraging, and I've approached mushroom foraging very much from a kind of a cultural or folk kind of uh, knowledge way. So learning how to forage edible mushrooms, that's really my passion, and my absolute happy place is being in a forest. So I'm really happy right now. So, but fungi are absolutely essential to life on Earth. It all really started in the water, in the oceans, and as the crust of the Earth developed over millennia or billions of years, uh, at the edges where the water and the rock met, the different life forms that started developing in the oceans, such as, and part of that were fungi and algae, who developed the ability to photosynthesize, got together. But on the actual terrestrial Earth, there was just rock. So there was just um, stones with lots of minerals in, and there was no organic matter. So these organisms basically teamed up, and the fungi acted as a root system to the algae. The algae provided the sugars that they could produce through photosynthesis, and the fungi had an ability to supply water and nutrients that they were able to dissolve from, or that they are able to dissolve from the rock with plants. And so that partnership evolved over millennia and is really there to this very day. So this then produced the organic matter on terrestrial Earth that allowed for different life forms to develop and to flourish. And without fungi, there wouldn't be any plants nor animals on land. And fungi have managed to probably occupy every single ecological niche that there is on Earth. So they're absolutely everywhere. They are
Adi,
in,
I'm
yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. Someone's just asked, is it possible to maximize the slides because they're quite small on our screen
Oh,
and
are
we can
they?
see your notes
Oh,
alongside. We
oh
can't
no,
see
that's
the
perfect.
full
Oh,
slide.
oh, sorry. Yeah. Is that better?
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Great, thanks for that. So, where was I? Uh, yeah. So fungi are everywhere. Fungi take really different forms as well. They're from single-celled organisms to these complex structures that we know and that we see, particularly now when we go outside, as a couple of you have mentioned, walking around. But these single-celled organisms are in our bodies, on our bodies, in plants, inside leaves, for example, or all over the world, really. Um, and what I want to talk about with you today is really first an introduction to fungi and mushrooms. What are they? How do they live? And what's their central role in ecological systems? And then I'll do a brief kind of yeah, just an introduction to mushroom cultivation and hopefully inspire some of you to look into how you could cultivate mushrooms in the spaces that you have available. So mushrooms, and that's really interesting for an illustrator, isn't it? But it's just fascinating when you see them. They really have wonderful colors, shapes, and a really fascinating science behind them as well. So what you can see here on the left is, you know, molds from, oh, have I just undone this present? Can you still see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, so what you see on the very left here on the lemon is a mold. So molds are fungi. The picture in the middle is a picture I took of a fly agaric, and then on the right-hand side here, you see some honey fungi that you hopefully don't see too often in your gardens that you have. So when we think about life on Earth, we often hear about kingdoms or queendoms of life. And from our education, we're familiar with the kingdom or queendom of animals, fauna, and plants, flora. But what we're not so familiar with is the whole kingdom or queendom of fungi. There is a real lack of education from an early age on. So in our schools, we don't hear enough about fungi, and in fact, the British Mycological Association, for example, advocates for fungi to be integrated in our national curriculum. So it's important to know as well that fungi are not plants and they're not animals. They have their own kingdom, and what I always love to do, kind of an icebreaker question with the groups that I do, and that's the question of is mushroom on toast, is that plant-based food? Unless that's it with you. So there are a huge variety of different types of mushrooms. There are over 30,000 different types of mushrooms in our forests and millions of fungi worldwide, with 90% still unknown, and an estimated number of about 800 new discovered species that are registered annually. And I want to just show you some of the amazing forms that they take, and how me as a forager who goes out into the woods differentiates between different fungi, and how I train people as well, or help people to recognize different fungi that are good for eating. So first of all, it's important to distinguish between what's underneath the cap of a fungus, of a mushroom. So what you can see here are all different pictures of gills. So these are all mushrooms with gills. You can see a saffron milk cap there on the very left with these salmon-colored dots on the stem. You see different caps turned upside down on the forest floor. On the right, you see a pink oyster mushroom, and these at the very bottom here, they're the gills of a bracket fungus that grew on a tree, so on a dead tree. Oh, sorry. And then there are the mushrooms. I don't know whether you've heard about them, with false gills. These here are chanterelles. These have almost like vein-like structures on their body. They're not like the attached, almost like leaves that mushrooms with gills have, but these structures, the false gills, are part of the mushroom's body. They're out now in Sussex. I'm pretty sure, I heard there are loads out in Scotland as well. And they're a fantastic edible mushroom. And then the most important group in terms of, well, really beginners mushrooms are the mushrooms that have got pores underneath their cap. So it's a sponge-like texture, and you can see that underneath the cap. It can have different colors. So what you see here on the left-hand side is a porcino, a penny bun, a cep, and the sponge of a penny bun is initially white. It then turns to yellow and green, and there are two more examples of a mushroom with pores. And then we've got these funny ones that have got neither gills nor pores, but they have teeth or spines. And the most famous one, because you can cultivate this, probably the lion's mane. This here is an example I found in Croydon last year. and the hedgehog fungus, which starts growing now in our forest. It's a winter mushroom. It's a hardy mushroom that grows quite slowly and to quite a good size, and they're absolutely delicious. And then you've got all weird shapes and sizes. Have a look at these ones here. I'm not going to go into detail of these different mushrooms, but the mushrooms really can take on any color and shape that you can only imagine. So it's always a wonderful kind of adventure going out and looking at mushrooms. Do ask any questions if you have. There are a few mushrooms that, as a forager for food, you need to be really, really aware of and careful of. Unfortunately, when teaching, I don't see these mushrooms too often. Claire, I see you've got a hand raised. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the difference in the sort of undersides, the gills.
Yeah.
And if we know anything about why they differ. So they all release spores in some way, I presume.
That's right, yeah.
But why why are they different? Do we know anything about that?
I've got no idea about that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Nope. No.
I'll do some research.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know why they evolved this different structure underneath the cap. And I mean, there is a whole group of mushrooms I'm not even talking about here that don't have this structure. And these are the whole the phylum of ascomites that don't have gills, nor do they have pores or spines, and they have a surface where they produce the spores from. So there are loads of different ways that the fungi have evolved and have developed the ability, and you're right, the main feature of that underside of a cap is to produce spores. But there are loads of different ways how fungi have developed the structures to do that. So deadly poisonous mushrooms, we really need to be aware of if we go foraging for food. Otherwise, you don't really have to be concerned about these mushrooms at all. The most one of the most poisonous ones and the one that kills most people across the globe is the death cap, and perhaps as well the destroying angel. Both of these mushrooms are in the family of Amanitas. You will know one of the Amanitas very well from books, from illustrations, and it's the fly agaric. That's the red mushroom. I had it in the middle of one of the first slides, the red mushroom with the white dots on. And there are some others, as you can see here, that are deadly poisonous. The good thing about deadly poisonous mushrooms is they won't harm anybody if you just touch them. So there's no danger in touching a mushroom. There's no danger even in touching your food or your body after having touched a poisonous mushroom. The toxins that are in the mushroom body need to be ingested. So you need to swallow parts of a mushroom to have any negative effects from it. So what are mushrooms? I like the comparison with the plant world. So if we think of an apple tree with the whole crown, with the branches, with the leaves, the stem, and then the whole root system that's underneath the or under the ground, that whole structure is the living organism of the plant. And with fungi, the living organism lives almost out of sight. It lives underground or it lives inside things such as old dead wood or leaf litter, and you can't see it obviously when you kind of poke around in leaf litter, especially now in this kind of weather and climate at this time of year. You will see those very fine white networks that are the mycelia of fungi. And what the apple tree or plants produce are fruits, And the mycelia, they produce mushrooms as their fruiting bodies. And interestingly, a mushroom is made up nothing else other than mycelium. And mycelium is made up of loads of different hyphae, they're called, so the small tubes that have an ability to grow, obviously, but then also to branch and to fuse. And these tubes can carry all that the fungus needs. So it carries water and nutrients inside that whole network and is able to distribute it to wherever it is most needed. So if the fruit of the mycelium is the mushroom, then its main function really of a mushroom is to, so those that grow now out of the earth or on a dead tree, their main function is to produce spores and to disperse these spores. So the spores grow in the gills or in the pores or tubes underneath the cap and are then dispersed in many different ways. So one example is a taxi service that mushrooms take. Does anybody know an example of such a mushroom that uses animals as a taxi service? So yeah.
Well, I suppose the fly agaric. You have a fly there.
Sorry, I'm losing it here. The fly agaric, no, it doesn't actually. The fly agaric doesn't use animals as a way of dispersal. It uses wind. Does anybody has anybody ever come across a mushroom that smells horribly?
Those ants, those zombie ants.
The zombie ants. Yes, absolutely. That's one way of a fungus using an animal to disperse the spores. Do you know how it works?
No, not in great detail, no.
Okay, so what happens there is that there's a whole genus of fungi they're called cordyceps, and these have so different species of cordyceps have developed an ability to grow on living insects. So each species of a cordyceps will infect a specific species of an insect. So for example, you have those that infect uh, ants. And what happens is once the spore starts growing on the body and into the body of an ant, it will start controlling the behavior of the ant and will do so that at the point when the mycelium is ready to produce a mushroom, it tells the ant to find a grass halm or wherever it can climb up to a certain height. And this the grass halm or whatever is directly above one of those ant paths where the ant walk, and it then somehow manages to direct the ant to go into what's called a death bite. So with its pincers, the ant bites really hard into whatever it is it has climbed onto and then dies. And what happens over the next few weeks is that the mushroom starts growing out of the body of the ant and then releases the spores onto the ants below, infecting new mushrooms and keeping itself alive. But I was thinking of other ways that mushrooms use animals. So there's, for example, the stinkhorn. Has anybody seen or smelt the stinkhorn mushroom? No? Um, it's a mushroom that grows out of a witch's egg. I mean, the language with the common language with, associated with mushrooms is just full of stories as well. So a witch's egg, and it has a gelatinous kind of a substance inside that egg, and when the mushroom pushes through it, that's left on the cap, and it then starts to smell like rotten meat, attracting flies. And inside that gooey substance are the spores of the mushroom. But that's a really, really famous and probably the most prized mushroom that that we consume that contain or that uses that taxi method. Have you got any idea what it might be? They have wars over this mushroom and kill each other's dogs. No? So it's a truffle mushroom that smells so nice that it is being dug out by pigs or other animals, eaten, and then the spores travel through the body and into the, there you go, and they are dispersed in that way. The mold spores, and you will have seen that when you have a badly infected slice of bread, for example, or that's sitting in a bread bag or something like that, and you open it, you can almost see, and you certainly smell the explosion of spores. So they use something like a catapult that then releases the spores. But the most common form is this. So can you see that?
No, there's nothing come up on the screen.
Can you see it?
No, I'm afraid not. Someone's just added in the comments saying that penicillin is a mold also.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Sorry, I wasn't sure. Could you see the film of the spores being released?
No,
Can you see it like that?
no.
No. Okay, I'll move on. Sorry, I'm having difficulties here with the slide. Okay, so can I just quickly get confirmation whether you can see this here?
We can't see any slides at the moment. We've just
You
got
can't.
the regular Zoom screen.
Oh, because I wasn't sharing. Thank you. Okay, that should work now.
Okay. Yeah, we've got the screen now. If you could just make the slides full
Yeah.
screen again, that'd be great.
Yeah, could you let me know whether it works with the video? Because I'm not quite sure with this.
Yeah, that's working.
So you can see that.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, thanks. So that really is the most common way how mushrooms release, or one of the most common ways how mushrooms release the spores. And you can see how many spores are being produced. So each mushroom produces about 1 million spores a day. So that's several million spores over the lifetime of a mushroom. And in fact, with every breath that we're taking, we're inhaling spores. They are absolutely everywhere. And what happens when a spore, so how does the reproduction work with spores? So when a spore lands somewhere where the conditions are right, it will start germinating and it will then grow hyphae. So these are the individual tubes that then start forming this mycelium. And what happens is that each spore contains only half the genetic information that it needs. A bit like with animals, where you have a semen and an egg cell that each contain half the genetic information. And what then happens is if two hyphae that have started growing out of compatible spores merge, they then form a mycelium, a full mycelium that is able to reproduce again and is able to produce new mushrooms and thus new spores. So that's kind of the reproductive cycle of mushrooms. And I'm just wondering whether we should have a short break at this point before I go a little bit more into how fungi eat and what their role in ecology is. So should we have a 5-minute break off screen? I think that's probably quite healthy. So I'm gonna restart at 7:15, and then we'll go on till 8 o'clock. And in the meantime, I'll have a look at the questions as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Welcome back. Nikki and Jackie, if there are questions coming in, I can't see the comments when I'm in presenting mode. Could you
Okay.
just
Yeah.
tell me?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
just
of course.
let me know verbally, and then I can react to the question.
No problem.
Yeah. There's
Um,
one just coming over the break.
Yes, I've seen it with the bracket fungi and trees. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I don't know whether you're all back. Could you maybe show with a raised hand if you're back? Let's give it a minute. So when you're back, it would be great if you could either switch on your camera or raise your hand. So I know. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Claire. You're back. I hope dinner is nice. Hi, Samantha. Brilliant. Okay. So, who posed the question about the trees? Elena. Are you here, Elena? Okay, maybe I'll come back to that question a bit
I
later on.
think Elena mentioned that she wouldn't turn her
Oh,
camera and microphone on, but that she would be here.
okay. So can you raise your hand, Elena, if you're here?
She's replied she is here.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thanks. So you've asked the question, it's a really interesting question about what you should do when you see a mushroom appearing at the base of a tree, such a London plane or a cherry tree. Should you tell the council about it? So I'm not sure. That really depends on the type of tree and on the type of fungus that has infected the tree or that grows on a tree, what the best management is for the tree. But what is certain, and I'll come to that right in a minute, is that by so when a fungus lives in a tree, inside the tree, and in this case, a living tree, it will weaken its structure. So there is a potential risk for accidents when a tree falls, when it becomes weak in its whole structure. But the management of trees that are infected with different fungi has changed quite considerably over recent years, as well as the understanding of how these organisms work together or live together or kill each other has moved on. It's really a whole interesting area. So it is probably really good to let the council know whether there is a fungus growing on a tree so that they can start investigating and make decisions about what's the safest way to go forward with it. But many trees will be able to survive for a long time with a fungus growing on them or in them, really. So maybe that's a good point to go back to the question of how does a fungus eat? Am I in presentation mode again? Can you see the whole thing? Yeah. So I'll start with plants and algae. And I've referred to that earlier on, who use the energy from sunlight to turn carbon dioxide into sugar and so produce their own food. And this food is then exchanged with us animals and with fungi so we and fungi, we need food that's already grown or that's already been produced. And so when we in our metabolic system, we need oxygen to survive and release carbon dioxide. And the oxygen is the product that happens through photosynthesis in plants. So there's an exchange of these gases, and we as humans and other animals, we swallow our food and take it inside our bodies to digest it. But with fungi, they need to digest that food that's already there, but they do it in a different way. So a fungus, if you imagine here, by the way, these pictures are all from a book called Humongous Fungus, which is a children's book and explains many of these processes. It's an absolutely amazing book. And the illustrations here show how the mycelium, so those white tubes of the fungus, grow into organic matter. So imagine that's a piece of wood here, and the white mycelium grows into it. And the hyphae, so the tip of the hyphae at the end of these mycelial strands, they release enzymes that then kind of break down the bigger particles in the wood, and then the hyphae are able to take these smaller particles in as food. The picture you can see here on the right top is a bag of grain spawn. So that's basically grain with white mycelium inside it, and this orange liquid there is what we mushroom growers call mushroom piss. It's the enzymes that a mushroom releases as well, and the products that happen in the digestion. So we do all of that inside of our bodies, but the fungus grows into its food. And the amazing ability of the fungi that are able to eat dead organic matter is that they have learned to break down the hardest compounds, the most complex carbon compounds, such as wood. So anything that contains wood can really mostly only initially be digested by fungi. So they play an absolutely crucial role in terms of decomposing woods. But there are other ways that mushroom feed. So they don't only feed on plant organic matter, but they can feed on other dead things as well. Or they can even swap food with other animals. You may have heard of leaf cutter ants or termites who cultivate fungi in their colonies, and the fungi will, in exchange for the food that the ants bring in this case here, a cut piece of leaf. So that's the food for the mycelium. In exchange for that, they will give them their own mycelium as food for the ants, as well as antibacterial enzymes that will help the ants as medicines. And then there are, the question really went a bit in that direction. There are fungi that will infect living plants, and as the example of the ant that we already discussed, living animals as well. So while most decomposing fungi will live on dead organic matter, some will live on living plants and animals, and may kill them in the process as well. Here is a picture of a honey fungus in the forest where I usually go to, that's infected this tree here, and a honey fungus is quite an aggressive fungus that will kill this tree over time. So there are, in terms of central ecological roles of fungi, there are two different types of fungi that we can distinguish, and the first ones are the mycorrhizal fungi, and then the saprotrophic ones. So let's start with the mycorrhizal ones. Mycorrhizal mushrooms are the ones that grow in a partnership with plants. So what you can see in the picture here, in the middle, the red mushroom there, it looks like a fly agaric, Amanita muscaria, is a symbiotic mycorrhizal fungus. Mycorrhizal, the word itself, stands for mycomycelium, and rhiza are roots. And these are fungi that will come together with the root system of a plant in different ways. They do that. And they set up a network of collaboration whereby they receive the sugars from the plant that the plant produces through photosynthesis, and will in exchange provide the plant with nutrients, micro and macronutrients, and with water that they can draw up and store in their whole vast mycelial network.
There's a question on the
Yeah.
chat whenever you want to come to it, Andy.
Yes, what's the question?
So Elena's asked, so that coal came about in a way because the process of fungi consuming all the material during the geological period was too great for them to process, as well as the rate at which trees were growing and dying, and creating layers of not properly decayed matter. Also, when you get mummified people in peat bogs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And is that a question, or is that just an added comment?
I think it was posed as a question in the chat.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, that's absolutely right.
Somewhere between the two.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think if you go to the BBC iPlayer and look up Earth with Chris Packham, episode 3 called Green, talks about the different phases of development of life on Earth, and he refers to, I'm pretty sure, to that phase where fungi weren't able or weren't around to such a degree, I can't remember correctly how it is, for the wood to be decomposed fully, and that's how coal has formed. Yeah. So that's a tip for viewing if you're interested in much more, and actually in learning more about that origin of life on Earth and the greening of Earth in that symbiotic relationship between plants and fungi. And the other most important form of fungi are the saprotrophic mushrooms. These are the ones that decompose dead wood mainly, or dead organic matter, and you can see an example here on the tree stem itself. That looks like an oyster mushroom that grows there, and then on the very left you've got the litter fungus there that grows on dead leaf litter or debris, that organic debris that lies around. So these saprotrophic fungi, the ones that obtain their nutrition from non-living organic materials, have an absolutely huge importance in terms of the decomposition in our environments. They can attack the solid materials like leaves and wood that are not easily available to other single-celled bacteria, for example, and so when the fungus grows into, for example, a fallen tree, it will, through the digestion process, will loosen up the structure of the wood, will create spaces for water and bacteria to come in, and for them to start decomposing the material further. And as this moves on, will create whole spaces within a tree. And you see that when you go into a wood, for example, and you see I saw a beautiful old oaks yesterday in the forest that is still alive, but certain parts of it have been taken over by fungi and have created these hollows that then enable other organisms to move in, including bigger birds, for example, owls or mammals that then start nesting in these trees, and obviously all the different insects that are using these spaces. And this ability of these mushrooms to eat dead organic matter allows us as well to cultivate them. So any cultivated mushroom, and here you can see a selection of mushrooms that I have grown, so pink, yellow, and the grey oyster and the lion's mane there. These are all mushrooms that fall under this category of saprotrophic fungi. So they are the ones that live and sustain themselves by eating dead organic matter. And the mycorrhizal fungi, here again an example of the fly agaric, the Amanita muscaria. And here in the bigger picture here, you can see the roots and the mycelium, so the white stuff, the white thin strands are covering the roots of a plant or of a tree here. And thus form that relationship between the tree and the mycelium. They're highly specialized organisms and are found associated with the root system of around 95% of all plants. That's an absolutely astonishing number, although the number I read in different sources varies quite a bit. But what is clear is the majority of plants will have some kind of a relationship with fungi that forms such a symbiotic relationship. Now, given that, it is just so surprising that we learn so little about the role of fungi, whereas we learn a lot about plants and about animals, but the whole area of fungi is a big unknown to us in our education system, but also in our academic scientific system. It's always held. The mycology had always a kind of a side role in biology or botany. So the fungus may colonize the roots of a host plant either through growing into the root system itself, or it could form these extracellular connections with the root system and thus create these connections with a plant. So these networks between fungi and trees in our forests are really important and improving the resilience of the entire forest ecosystem. So what we know in our forests are that about 80 to 90% of all temperate forest trees will have these relationships whereby the fungi are on the outside of the root system. And in this, the exchange system that happens is that macronutrients such as nitrogen, potassium, or phosphorus, and micronutrients such as iron, zinc, copper, magnesium are exchanged. And the fungi have got an absolutely, or the mycelia in the earth have got a really important role in the maintenance of a healthy soil as well. Fungi produce glomalin, which is a compound that acts like a glue and a store for atmospheric carbon in the soil. So it is like the glue that glues together the earth whilst still allowing spaces for all the other organisms that are in a healthy underground to live in there. And they play an absolutely important role in terms of carbon sequestration. So as a carbon sink, they have a huge ability to absorb the carbon. So they bind the carbon and deposit it in the ground like that. There are really interesting and fascinating studies as well that talk about these networks that go further and beyond than to the exchange of nutrients. And they talk about the ability of ecosystems in forests that include these fungi and plants are able to communicate in some way, whereby, for example, messages are being passed on from one tree that is affected by an insect that is moving in to, and that's passed on to other trees through that common network that they have, to in order to make adaptive changes so they can produce some compounds, these trees, that then will help fighting off the insects as they move in. I don't know whether any of you have come across the work by Suzanne Simard or others that talk about the wood wide web or mother trees, so whereby these networks have got an absolutely central role. And I think there's a big debate about how far these networks go. And I've seen arguments that these networks are much more closely knit communities within a forest as well. But what is for sure is that these networks are absolutely essential for the survival of these plants and for improving the health of the whole environment as well in a forest. And the same goes, I guess, for farming practices as well. So I think learning about fungi is absolutely fundamental, and it's so important. As you've heard, plants and fungi underpin all life on Earth, supporting our livelihoods and providing us with food, medicine, raw materials, and much more. But most fungi are elusive because they hide in plain sight. So they grow inside of trees, they grow underground. But they are everywhere. So just 1 teaspoon of soil can contain hundreds of fungal species. And more than 90% of all fungi on Earth are still waiting to be found. So it's also a journey of discovery that's important. So I think it is important that studies are developed and are furthered and funded appropriately to learn just so much more about fungi. And that's why my mission really with my business is to, I call it cheesily, share much love, but really to help people connect with fungi, learn about fungi, but then also engage with fungi through, for example, foraging or workshops. And as gardeners, or some of you are gardeners, you know how beneficial that is in terms of our own well-being, in terms of our mental health. Just short kind of contact or short time outside in nature, there's really good studies that show us that this will improve our mental health. Gardening has been shown to be absolutely beneficial. And on the other hand side, I think knowledge of fungi and of their habitat will help us becoming more aware of the threat that they are exposed to through loss of habitats, first and foremost, and climate change and biodiversity loss. So if we lose certain tree species, we will lose certain fungi species because they're so closely connected and can't live one without the other in most cases. And so fungi have got, I'm not going to go into any of this really, but some of you mentioned already in the comments or otherwise, there are really important kind of areas that can be relevant to our economic systems as well. So in terms of food and farming, we know that in changing the farming practices that allows fungi to grow alongside the plant crops that we're producing has the benefit of supporting systems in a more longer term way. We know that we have a problem with climate change and with meat consumption, and fungi offer a fantastic food that can be used as a replacement for meat. There's the whole area of materials as well, where fungi can play a role, whereby we want to replace plastics and oil-based products in all these different areas, from packaging, fashion, design, and home construction. So there are fantastic experiments with insulation made with fungi, for example, packaging, clothes, mushroom leather. And then fungi can play a role in with regard to the environment as well. So I was talking a little bit about the carbon issue. They can play a role in remediation, so that is kind of cleaning up the mess that we are making. That I've seen fantastic, really interesting examples of how oyster mushrooms have been used in the Amazon to clean up oil spills that were left by companies there. And then in terms of health, there is the whole area of obviously of mushroom as a food that's supporting our own systems, our gut biome, for example. And then there's the whole research that is going on at the moment with psilocybin, so the psychedelic research that's got some initial really interesting results with regard to mental health. And supplements that need further research. So, for example, the tinctures that are made with mushrooms. So, in terms of cultivation, I just want to briefly before, or maybe, are there any questions at this point? Or does anyone want to ask anything? So I've really kind of ended the talk on mushrooms and fungi, but I want to just give you.
There is a question in
ideas.
the
Yeah.
chat box
Yeah.
from Elena. So the
Yeah.
difference between soil that is dead due to pesticides and contamination with excess slurry means carbon capture is not possible. Have seen the fabrics and building materials made with fungi at architect work shows.
Yeah. So I'm not sure whether the first part is a question, Elena, or whether that's a comment. I don't know much about that. So if you can elaborate. Oh, it is a comment, you say, rather than a question. Thank you very much. So thanks for that. Yeah. With regard to the materials that are used in buildings, there is lots of research going on, or research and development. Lots of this is going on behind closed doors, but there are some major issues as well that need to be addressed with regard to the durability of these materials as well. But it's a huge, interesting area which I find really fascinating. But imagine living in a house made with mushroom walls. So, should I just briefly talk about the different ways of cultivating mushrooms and how we cultivate mushrooms? Would you be interested in that?
And that's something we've started experimenting with at the
Oh,
growing
fantastic.
project a bit
Okay, yeah.
this year. So it would be interesting to hear your point of
Okay.
view.
Okay.
We have done a little bit of cultivation on coffee grounds, and we're now in the process. We're kind of in the waiting process at the moment. We've inoculated some logs with dowel rods, and we've also created a wood chip bed. So the moment we're
Fantastic.
waiting to see how these things go.
I think I'm not gonna do the presentation. It sounds like you've already done all these different processes. So the coffee ground, how far did you get with that?
But what we did quite a small sample. So there's a
Yeah,
community
yeah,
cafe, and they
yeah,
gave us our excess coffee
yeah,
grounds, and
yeah.
we grew some oyster mushroom spores, which did fruit. I actually just had them at home because it was easier to keep the temperature
Yes.
and
Yeah,
keep
yeah, yeah,
them
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
sprayed with
Yeah, yeah.
water. A few fruit had then dried up before we could harvest them. And I don't know if that
Okay.
was just slightly inconsistent watering on my part. But then we did
Maybe,
get a
yeah.
few flushes that
Oh,
worked
fantastic. Oh,
well, which
fantastic.
was nice. A very small harvest, but it was
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
quite
yeah.
an interesting process.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Coffee grounds are not that easy because of the risk of contamination.
Mm.
And so there's basically kind of two processes that you can do, and these are the first ones are kind of the ones that we cultivators use, whereby you use a substrate like straw or straw mixed with coffee grounds or wood that you have to sterilize then as well, that is inoculated with grain spawn. And then you try to get into a cycle where, for example, when I'm producing mushrooms and go to market, I want to harvest the freshest mushrooms on a Saturday night or Sunday morning before I go to market on Sunday. And then there are the other methods, like the mushroom bed, so a vine cap bed or a log or totem pole methods, whereby you inoculate different substrates, so wood logs, or also that are prepared in the right way, and that then kind of imitates the natural cycle of mushroom growing, and you'll have fruiting mushrooms after 18 months to 24 months in the natural cycle. So now is a good time for them to fruit if they've been inoculated 18 months ago or so. Yeah.
Let you know the results of those
Yeah,
ones because
yeah, and
they were both done more
yeah,
recently.
okay. And if you ever need any, or if you have any questions regarding, the cultivation, I'm more than happy to have a look at that as well.
Thank you.
Okay. So, does anyone else? Oh, is there more comments? Yeah, I was thinking. Thinking about how they process, so comment. I was thinking about how they process carbon dioxide via dead trees who consume carbon dioxide to photosynthesize. I'm not sure what the question is or the comment. So what happens is that when the mycelium eats the organic matter, it will need a lot of oxygen and will release carbon dioxide as a gas as well into the room or the environment. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Should we end?
Okay.
Talk if
I
there are
think,
no more questions.
yeah, if no one has got any other questions, it doesn't seem like there are. All right, well, thank you very much for that, Adi. That was really fascinating insight into the world of mushrooms and covered an enormous amount of detail in that time as well, which was great. And thank you to everyone for coming. This is the final talk in our series of summer talks. But we will have events at Barnes Common going on throughout the autumn at the Growing Project and walks and talks on Barnes Common in general. So like this one, everything can be found on our Eventbrite page. But thank you again. See, several people have thanked you in the chat as well, Heidi. So thank you
Thank
again
you. Yeah,
for your time
thanks
and for
very
that
much.
really
Yeah,
interesting
brilliant.
talk.
Thank you.
Okay, and just to say, if you're interested in what I do as a business, you can find me on Instagram at Addi's Urban Mushrooms, or my website is urbanmushrooms.co.uk.